Hello everybody and welcome to the Face Reading Secrets of the People in the News session. Today's reading is number 19. And of course, if you're interested in the subject of face reading, you can look up my YouTube's Introduction to Face Reading and Face Reading 101 Part 1, Part 2. And soon, very soon, within a couple of months, I believe, you will be able to buy my book, Face Reading Secrets for Successful Relationships. And if you click subscribe below, when the book comes out, you will be notified. The book will come out as an ebook and as a hard copy. Now, someone requested that I do the reading on Steve Jobs, and I'm glad the person did. Steve Jobs was not only an extraordinary inventor, but he definitely had a very interesting face to read. And here he is. Steve Jobs, as most people can remember him. As you know by now, first I will speak about his personality, that is embodied in his face, and then his profile, the embodiment of his temperament. Steve Jobs appears to be a Neptune personality. Here is the geometrical shape on the left of Neptune, and a couple of other people with similar faces, just to get you familiarized with the Neptune face. I think it appears for the first time in my readings. So what do we know about the Neptune? Of all pure personalities or pure faces, the Neptune are the most spiritually inclined. They're seekers from the get-go, and by the age of 30 are usually well underway in their spiritual journey. And for some reason, if for some reason they do not get involved in spiritual pursuits or search for meaning, they often end up doing drugs, which we know Steve did, or engaging in other self-destructive behavior because of the sense of emptiness they experience. Of course, by the age of 30, we know Steve Jobs had a lot of meaning in his life and a lot of interests. The Neptune are imaginative, creative, and resourceful. They can master any vocation or art as long as they're inspired. So if Steve were born 100 years ago, he could become a great painter, perhaps an inventor of a plane, or build something like Eiffel Tower. The Neptune often have difficulties in personal relationships because of their sense of right or wrong, which is self-determined and does not always correspond with social norms. But remember, Steve was not always a Neptune. Let's look at some faces from the past, faces that he had. Look at the evolution of his face and a few interesting features. It looks like at a younger age, the first two pictures, Steve was a Venus. He was a charmer, liking attention, falling and being in love, making peace, and coming up with practical ideas. But by the age of 32, picture 3, and into his 40s, picture 4, he's Mars, ready to fight in order to get his way, confrontational, generous, open to giving and taking without regard for consequences, ready to rule like a king. And finally, by late 40s and early 50s, he is morphing into a Neptune. I know that there is a biography, in fact several biographies written about Steve Jobs. I wonder how much what I say corresponds with what biographers say. I never read biographies. But I want you to think about these two interesting features, Steve's eyes and the corners of his lips. On pictures 1 and 2, both of his eyes are wide open. On picture 3, which was taken when Steve was 32 years old, you can see his right eye, see blue arrow, is slightly closed, and that stays to the rest of his life, pictures 4, 5, and 6. As I told you in other readings, the left side of the face is associated with a person's past, and the right side with the person's present and the potential for the future. It looks like at some time in his 30s, unconsciously, Steve started sensing something coming from the future that he would rather not see. That's my take on it. But look now at the corners of his lips. From young age until he died, Steve never lost his natural optimism. Neither of the corners of his lips is curving down, which would signify bitterness and resentment. And now let's look at Steve Jobs' profile, that is temperament, and few more features. First, the temperament. Follow the green lines. The corner of the jaw, the chin, and the forehead are all almost bilious. I say almost because his forehead is tilted. That is not really bilious, it is more a sanguine characteristic. But if you look at the pink arrow, you can see the roundness of the top of his forehead. That is bilious. Also, if you follow the two green lines on the front of his face, you can see that this tiltedness created a bow-like profile, the characteristic of the nervous temperament. In other words, pure bilious. So let's summarize now what we see. What we have here is a bilious with some sanguine impulsivity and a slightly nervous cast. What it all means is that Steve was willful, organized, meticulous, a strict and demanding boss, at times insensitive to the weaknesses of others, long-term planner, and yet able to take risks and go crazy. That's the sanguine. And of course, the nervous cast reflects his ability to think fast and to be extra creative, way beyond what the pure bilious would be. Now combine all of the above with a couple of features like see the red arrow, long almond-shaped nostrils signifying high intelligence, and see blue arrow, hooked shaped nose portraying the conqueror, and you have a creative genius able to implement his ideas successfully, as Steve Jobs indeed was. And that is all. Thanks for being with me today. Talk to you next week.